Good morning and welcome. Hi everyone. It's absolutely thrilling to have you all here in the room and joining us live stream at this 7th Accelerator for Enterprising Women Summit. Absolutely thrilled to see so many fresh-faced faces here today. Now, Murdoch University is an absolutely great space to come together and have this conversation, and I think we've got a really good morning and afternoon session planned for you all. My name's Pia Turchinoff and I'm going to be the MC for you today. And before we begin though, let me just start off with a couple of formalities and importantly acknowledge that we are hosting this event on the land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and also that I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you join me today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in the Livestream summit. I would like to pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging. Now I'm really excited to get today underway. Let's get some energy into the room and also hopefully for you watching us from wherever you may be sitting. Shortly I'll introduce Professor Romy Lawson to you, who's the Interim Vice-Chancellor of Murdoch University. Then we'll jump into the panel discussion featuring some of WA's biggest and brightest tech and business minds. We've got a fantastic panel for you and you're really going to enjoy hearing their stories, their insights, and I think their lessons learned over the years. The big theme for today is why women are such a valuable resource. I think you all in your mind know the answer there, but let's unpack it a bit and let's see if we come up with a collective answer to that as well. We'd love you to join in the discussion, so as you're listening, make sure you write down some questions. Don't be shy to ask. If you're online, you can add your question to the Facebook live stream, and we'll get to the question and answer session towards the end of the panel discussion. So don't hold back. Our panellists are here to share their knowledge, and they love being asked questions. So, and you're asking them about themselves, so they'll know the answers, I guarantee you. And then to conclude the summit part of this event, we'll be introducing Lacey Filipich, who's somebody you'll definitely want to be sticking around to listen to. Lacey is a chemical engineer turned entrepreneur who founded 2 schools teaching financial literacy, and she knows a thing or two about that. She bought her first property at the age of 19, another 2 at 23, and was in the position to retire by her 31st birthday. So quite a story to share. But luckily she didn't retire and she didn't disappear, but she decided to keep sharing her wisdom with us all. So Lacey will be delivering the keynote address later on. And as to myself, just a few short words as to what my footprints in the entrepreneurial world are. I'm a corporate commercial lawyer by profession way back when, gave up practicing law many years ago, and in the last 30 odd years have worn many hats. I have been a founder of businesses, successful and unsuccessful businesses. I've been a board director, company director. I work in commercialisation and innovation as well. My philosophy is about living life with curiosity. And I think that is part of the reason why I've worn so many hats in my journey, and I've worked in so many different fields, and I've met so many amazing people. I'm a woman, pretty obviously. I am a mother of 3 adult children. They're all girls, and I'm a passionate supporter of female entrepreneurs and technology. I think together we can absolutely change the world and nothing should hold us back. Until very recently, I was the chair of Women in Tech WA. I'm still involved heavily in the cyber and tech space. I sit on a number of boards, including several startups, and I mentor lots of young women just like yourselves. So more importantly, though, I am, like you, really looking forward to hearing what our panellists have got to share with us today. So when I heard about Accelerating for Enterprising Women and their mission to get more females to consider entrepreneurship as a career path, I couldn't say no. Absolutely jumped on the opportunity and absolutely delighted to be here today. So what is the Accelerator for Enterprising Women? It's a national initiative designed to support and empower young women aged 18 to 24 years to create self-made career paths. Excuse me. Aged 18 to 24 years to create self-made career paths and see entrepreneurship as a valuable career choice. They do this through events like today and partnering with leading universities such as Murdoch University. We also acknowledge that one of the biggest barriers preventing many young women from starting their own business is a concern around finances, and I think that's why it's really exciting to have the Kickstarter Challenge as part of this program. The Kickstarter Challenge is a competition whereby you submit your business or entrepreneurial idea onto the Enterprising Women website. Then 5 finalists will get the chance to pitch to a panel of expert judges at a Shark Tank style event in Canberra. And at the end of the year, there'll be a $60,000 pot of money that will be shared amongst the 5 finalists. And that money could be just what you need to get your business idea off the ground or to supercharge that entrepreneurial concept that's floating around in your mind. And you never know, you might be the next startup unicorn that we'll all read about in a few years' time and emulate the likes of those Australian greats such as Atlassian and Canva, who started right here in Perth. So we'll tell you a little bit more about the Kickstarter Challenge later on and the details about how you get involved. But in the first instance, what I would like to do is thank our industry sponsors and supporters, because events like this don't just happen. We need to work as a collective and collaborate with others. So for today, we would like to thank the Council of Small Business Organisations Australia, the Office of Women through the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, our industry partner, which is Visa, and of course, Murdoch University, who've provided us with an incredible space and a really good start to create a program that's hopefully memorable and has real impact for each and every one of you. A big special thank you to Mel and Amelia and the team, who've done a fabulous job in preparing everyone, making sure that we are all really comfortable today. And I think hoping that you leave today feeling inspired and ready to turn your passion into your profession. Now, a reminder, if you want to share any of the wisdom that you hear today, don't be shy. Please use social media platforms. It's always good to let others know that have missed out on some of the wisdom that you are hearing today. Make sure that you tag at Accelerator for W and hashtag Enterprising Women. If you are going to Google the website, a quick tip is that it's enterprising-women.com.au. Don't forget the dash, otherwise you might get a bit lost out there in the internet world. So let's get to it. First of all, and to kick things off, is Professor Romy Lawson, who, as I said, is the Interim Vice-Chancellor of Murdoch University. And Romy has generously agreed to share some of her tips that she's learned along her journey and along her pathway, as well as what the university is doing in a more general perspective to inspire the next generation of women such as yourselves. So please, without further ado, join me in welcoming Professor Romy Lawson.
Many thanks, Pia, and also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're at, the Wajja Budja of the Noongar Nation. It's really important that we do that. Murdoch has been on the land of the Wajja Budja for thousands of years, and it's always been a place of learning, particularly around South Street, and it's a real privilege that we get to continue that learning tradition that's been on these lands. So it's always an honour to be able to do that acknowledgement. Welcome to everyone who's in the room, and welcome to those who are online with us today. It's great to have you with us. I think you're in for a very exciting day. I've heard a lot of these people speak before, and they are top-notch. You are going to learn so much and be inspired so much by being part of it. So well done to you guys for putting your hand up and saying, I'm going to go along and listen to that. I think this could be a good thing for me. So, take what you can from it. I'm sure there'll be nuggets there that are going to be really useful for you with all the things that you're planning to do into your futures. So I'll tell you a little bit about Murdoch University. If you look over there on the sign, you see we've got a little tagline that's called Free Your Think, which I think is very apt today. And Murdoch University was named after a guy called Sir Walter Murdoch. And he said something that we've really grasped at a university and we think was really important. So he said, the only education out of which good can come is the education which teaches you to think for yourself instead of swallowing the fashion of the moment. Hence, free your think. It's your ideas, it's your thoughts that you need to grasp and run with, and that's what's going to take you and make you what you want to be into the future. So we're very proud of that. So we continually, as a university, keep thinking about how can we give the opportunities to connect. It's not just about being a siloed organisation. How can we connect with the wider community that we're in? How can we connect nationally and internationally? How can we get those collaborations, those partnerships in? You know, again, you used to say that education was all about reading for a degree. It's not. It's about doing, it's about applying, it's about experiencing. That's what it's all about nowadays. And it's important that we get those partnerships to collaborate. That's the future of education. And then lastly, it's about that creativity of giving people the chance to have those thinks and take them where they want to take them, and giving them the platforms to be able to do those kind of things. So there's different opportunities at Murdoch that you can do that. We have a whole bachelor's in entrepreneurship that you can do in a combined degree. If you come and do a different kind of discipline, you can always do a minor with us in innovative and creative thinking as an add-on. We also, for all our undergraduates, get them to do something called a career learning spine, which gives you that space in the curriculum to do some extra things that you might not get to do in your normal discipline, and also to give you some of those skills that you need for the future, for your careers going forward. We have a thing called a Launchpad that's open to anyone to come and use all the time. Mel at the back there is the person who leads the Launchpad for us. But it's that place where you really get the opportunity to connect, to partner, to do activities, hackathons, creativity, you know, all those kind of things. So it's a space for all our students to use. We have an entrepreneur in residence who comes to that space and that you can spend time with throughout the week. And then lastly, we have things like a group that's called Mesh. And Mesh is basically, we've said, well, actually, we've got some graphic designers that we have that are wanting to study at the university. Do we want to just put them in a classroom and teach them about graphic design, or do we want them to have a real-world experience? And we said, we think it's the latter. So what we did was we started a company called Mesh. So the students, rather than going and sitting in the classroom for their learning time, they come and run the company, and they have real clients that they work with, they scope, they do the work, and they run the company in that way and get that real world experience. And we're building other experiences like that throughout the university. So there's some exciting things I hope you can hear that are going on at Murdoch. And we're delighted that we work in this particular space with Spacecubed, who also have many exciting things going on throughout the whole of Perth. The other thing that I was asked to talk about a bit was myself. And I was thinking, well, actually, does my journey really have lots of entrepreneurship in it? And I didn't really think it did. I had one example. My sister was very theatrical when we were younger, so she was always the one who wanted to put on a show, you know, and entertain everyone. I was the one at the door charging my parents to come in to see the show. So I suppose that's my best attempt of how I was being a bit entrepreneurial. But I suppose what I wanted to do, I do like to try and think outside the box and be creative in my work. I think if I was ever in a job where I was told this is what you do and this is how you do it, I would run screaming. I don't think that could be the job for me. So I do like to bring innovation into my work. And so I kind of thought, well, what's helped me to be able to work in that way? And so I thought if I can pass on 5 top tips for you, then maybe one of them might be of use to into your futures. So the first one is don't be afraid to think differently. Just because everyone else is thinking one way, don't be afraid to think in a different way. Don't be afraid to question, well, why do we do that? Why is it that way? Because quite often it's just because that's the way it's been, you know, and there's a good reason to test and to challenge things. The second thing is it's okay to say no. And it's quite hard sometimes when everyone else is going, you know, in one way for you to say no. And the way that I found myself very comfortable at saying no was checking out my moral compass. And when I didn't feel comfortable with something or an approach that people were asking me to do, if my moral compass was telling me, yeah, there's something not quite right here, I felt very confident in saying no to things and thinking of a different way of achieving it. Not saying you still don't need to achieve, but, you know, thinking about how you might want to achieve that. The third one is about managing your creative expectations. I have these wild and wacky ideas that go on in my head. Anyone who works with me comes away going, oh my goodness, what's she expecting from us? And to tell the truth, when we actually get to realise them, they're never quite as amazing as they are in my head. And I've had to learn to manage that. And I relate it back to a frozen pizza. So when I see a frozen pizza in the supermarket, the picture looks absolutely magnificent. I go, shove it in the oven, get it out, and then you look at this thing. It never looks like the box, does it? Let's be honest. But as long as it still tastes good and it tastes like a pizza, then it's okay. It doesn't necessarily have to be everything you thought it would be in your head. So manage those creative expectations. And you can always build and you can always keep on progressing. Number 4, it's okay to fail. In fact, it's quite good to fail. But it's not okay not to learn from your failures, okay? Everything that perhaps doesn't go quite the way you want is a chance for you to think, well, why? What would I do differently next time? And the last one is don't wait for perfection. You know, I know a lot of people go, oh, well, we've not quite got it all planned out. We've not quite got everything in place yet. And it never quite happens because they're always waiting, always waiting. And I came across a phrase a couple of roles ago that I had, and this gentleman said to me, he says, think big, start small, start now. And I love that advice. You know, have the big vision, but take the slice that you think you can work with and you can get going with. Because as soon as you start getting going, you start learning. Yeah, you'll have some failures, you'll have some things that you go, oh, I wish I hadn't done it that way. But you're starting and you're starting to learn. So those are my 5 top tips. Hopefully some of them resonate with you. I'm going to sign off now, but I wish you a fabulous day. And I'll look forward to catching up with you as the day progresses. Thank you all.
Thank you, Romy. Great tips and really resonated, certainly for me, and I know that it's going to be unpacked a little bit more by our panellists. So take it to heart, and I love the idea that it's true, perfection is a myth, you know, and risk is a good thing. So let's keep going with this conversation and see where it takes us. It's now time for me to introduce the panel to you who are going to help us unpack some of these conversations, and hopefully we'll touch a little bit too on why women are the most valuable resource. We've got an impressive lineup for you today. First up, I'd like to introduce Megan Del Borello, who's the founder of Behind the Brands, an organisation designed to support female founders to build profitable and sustainable businesses. Next to Megan, we have Dr. Katharine Giles, who's the CEO and Managing Director of OncoRes Medical, who works in improving the accuracy of breast cancer surgery and to reduce the physical, psychological and economic burdens of repeat surgery. Also joining the panel today, we have Bec Thompson, who's the director and founder of Sandbar Co, a new Perth-based business that makes very innovative beach tables. And we're going to actually talk through the table itself and that process, which will be really interesting. And lastly, we have Elizabeth Knight, who's the founder and director of Purposeful, a startup that provides students with programs to help them find their place in the world. So you can see why the ladies are here today. There's definitely a theme going on, and we're absolutely thrilled that they made the time to join us. Thank you all for joining us, ladies. I'm just going to step away. We're going to move the lectern around a little bit and give us 10 seconds. It's always wonderful being in charge of the mic. Do you ever feel powerful having the mic in your hand, or are you terrified? I had to learn to feel powerful. I used to be terrified. Thank you, ladies. Absolutely thrilled that you could be here today. We've got lots of questions we'd like to ask you, and I dare fear that we're not going to have time to go through all of them. But I will encourage you honestly to ask questions. Think about what you'd like to get from them. There's no such thing as a dumb question. If you're thinking about the question, I can guarantee you someone else in the room is also thinking of that question. And I think the panellists themselves would be keen to hear some of those questions as well. So we're going to start off first with introducing everyone and getting a bit of a sense of what they actually do before we unpack some of those bigger, hairier concepts. And let's start with you, Megan. You're sitting right next to me, so you're in the firing line. You started your career in corporate marketing, but have now built a business that's really about supporting female entrepreneurs and very much about the brand and the women behind the brands. So tell us a little bit about that, please.
Sure. So Behind the Brands is an ecosystem for female founders from startup through to scale, and we're really about reshaping the economy and advancing women through entrepreneurship. So our focus is on helping women build successful and sustainable businesses without the hustle, I guess you could say, as well. And it came about when I had left my corporate job in marketing. I started a marketing agency and I found it really lonely going from having 40 staff to just myself, a 6-week-old baby and a dog. My husband was FIFO at the time. And I found I didn't know anyone else in business and found it really isolating. And when I would try and, I would Google women in Perth in business and nothing was really coming up, and the people that I was seeing in the newspaper and in the media weren't really the role models that I wanted. And so Behind the Brands kind of came about from that, because I wanted to actually start highlighting female founders, and I actually uncovered quite a few successful female founders in WA, but they just seem to hide. And so I'm obviously a big believer in, if you can see her, you can be her. And I wanted to give female founders that platform where they could shine, we could highlight them and let them know about all the amazing things that they're doing.
It wasn't the first business you started, though, was it? So I guess looking at what the business is trying to achieve and making that jump from I see a problem to building a business around it and taking that entrepreneurial leap, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Let's wind it a little bit back and say, how prepared were you for this business, given what you've done previously?
I think, when I was in corporate marketing, I was a managing director, so I was a partner in the business, and that kind of prepared me to start my marketing agency, so I had the business experience behind me. But I guess going into Behind the Brands was totally different because it was new territory for me. Yes, I had the marketing experience, but here I was, assisting and mentoring women in all different types of businesses. So I really had to quickly learn all about the stages of business and, business in tech and e-commerce. And I guess it semi-prepared me having businesses prior, but it was a new learning curve for me, which has been really fantastic.
A jill of all trades. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, about all the skills you need to have in order to be an entrepreneur and what you think you need to know and what you don't need to actually know. But, thinking about the fact that you were running this marketing agency and your successful, corporate career in that sense, it was an area that you really knew well because you studied marketing and the like. We often talk about starting businesses, but how did you know it was the right time to close that business and start the next business? Because very often I think we shy away from that.
Yeah. So when I started my marketing agency, that was 7 years ago, I had a 6-week-old, and I left my previous job because I faced gender discrimination, and my husband had been telling me for years to start this marketing agency, and it grew really, really fast and became a really successful business. But a couple of years into it, I kind of was getting that feeling that I wasn't enjoying it. I was feeling a bit burnt out. I didn't like being on call to clients, and it just wasn't sitting well with me. So I actually started to change what I was doing and stop accepting clients. And Behind the Brands came about probably 3 years into my marketing agency. And March last year, I had my second child, literally 2 weeks before we went into lockdown. And it was at that point I decided to close the doors entirely and let go of all my clients. And it was, I think the biggest reason was it just didn't fit in with my lifestyle anymore. I wasn't enjoying what I was doing, and that was my biggest money earner. So I was a little bit hesitant, but I'm guided by my gut instinct and my intuition, and it was telling me that it's time to stop doing this business and focus solely on Behind the Brands, and that's what I went with.
Brilliant. Did you walk away with, was there any sense of failure in that, or were you really happy with the decision you made? Because very often I think, as we close things down, there's almost that expectation by many around us that, it was going well, why would you close it? So how did you balance that internal dialogue, if there was an internal dialogue like that?
I think I'd been thinking about it for a few years, and having my son and the start of COVID and everything was the catalyst for it. When I closed it and I released my last client, it was actually a sense of relief. And if I think about now, people ask me still, companies, will you do our marketing for us? I just get this horrible feeling, and I know that it was the right decision.
So trust yourself, trust your instinct.
Definitely.
You definitely know the answer to it. Brilliant. With the second one, did it get, this is a strange question because you now had 2 children in tow as opposed to 1. Did it get easier starting the second business? Was there lessons learned from the first one that just made it so much simpler, or is it same but different?
It was definitely easier from that I had learnt a lot along the way. With the second child, definitely not easier at all. He's just a total different kid, and it's made it a lot harder. But having my marketing agency, the mistakes that I made, I knew not to make them in the second business as well. And so not that I haven't made mistakes in the second business, I definitely have. But because I had learnt so much, it really was a lot easier going into my second business, and I moved it along a lot faster as well.
Okay, thanks. So Kath, let's move on to you now. Your career's mirrored one that we very often see with successful entrepreneurs. It's sort of the squiggly line. You've moved from medical doctor to working in the investing space, now entrepreneur, CEO, and very much at the cutting edge of innovation. Did you always know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
No, so I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it. I guess what I did always know is I wanted to have a career where I could help people. And so when during school, and I think I certainly went to a school where if you did well at school, you did medicine, you did engineering, or you did law. So I knew I wanted to help people, and I knew I liked working with my hands. So when I was 16, I was like, well, I'll go do medicine. And medicine was wonderful, and I loved so many elements of it. But at the end of the day, very similar to me, and I knew that it wasn't going to be the career that made me happy. I knew I was a good doctor, but for myself, it wasn't going to be something that was a good career for me to pursue for the rest of my career. So it was a very difficult decision to leave medicine. My husband had changed his career completely, so he'd gone from being in environmental science and then done an MBA and moved into management consulting. So, and a whole bunch of his friends had made really big career changes as well. So I followed in their footsteps and did an MBA, not knowing what I wanted to do. I just knew at that point I wanted to get as far away from clinical medicine as I could. I had the same feeling when I handed in my pager. I'm like, oh, thank goodness I never have to see that thing again. And yeah, went on a journey of discovery through the MBA.
So the Accelerator for Enterprising Women, we're talking about, turning your passion into your profession. So it sounds like that's the path you've been walking in finding what that passion looks like and then actualising it. Yeah,
well, I guess thanks for reminding me, Pierre. The thing was that at that 18 years ago, people were really, anyone who heard I was giving up a medical career was like, you're crazy. You've just spent 6 years doing this. Why would you give that up? And it's the best, it's the best career. And I know certainly my parents were saying, because I sort of had, in the middle of my degree, had cold feet about it, and they said, no, you've done 3 years, you've got a whole science degree, but you'll never get recognised for any of that. You'll have to start at the beginning again. Just stick with it, which I did, and I'm so glad that I did and listened to them. But I know my dad in particular was like, this is such an amazing career. You have the ability to help so many people in this career that you've chosen. Why would you give it up for something how are you ever going to make that impact on people in anything else? And so it was a real struggle to make the decision to give it up. But now, with the journey I've taken and keeping the passion of that, I want to have a career where I help people front of mind, but not knowing where it would take me. What I found is what I do now, if I'm successful in doing it, I'll be able to help so many more people than I could ever do one-on-one. as
So
a
that's
doctor.
a brilliant segue to actually tell us all about what OncoRes Medical does.
So at OncoRes Medical, we're developing a completely new imaging technology. So think ultrasound or MRI. So this is something in that box, but completely new. And it's a technology that effectively gives surgeons superpowers. So surgeons use their sense of touch to make a lot of decisions in surgery, like is this a nerve, is this a vein? But they also use it to figure out if they've got all the cancer out. So breast cancer, the majority of women diagnosed with breast cancer will have just the lump removed with a rim of healthy tissue around it. Surgeons are using their fingers to figure out whether they've got it all out. And it look like they're looking for effectively a grain of sand in a bowl of jelly with a set of gloves on. Of course they miss it, and they miss it 30% of the time at least. And so these women will get a phone call when the pathologist gets to look at the specimen under the microscope a week after the surgery to say, sorry, it's a bit too close to the edge. You've got to go back and have another operation. So this creates around $700 million of unnecessary surgery every year just in the US alone. And our technology effectively gives the surgeon superpowers of touch. So it produces images at a microscopic scale of tissue stiffness and they on a screen, and the surgeon uses our probe inside the surgical cavity and looks around for any tumour that they might have missed so they can remove all of it the first time.
What a brilliant, brilliant invention, and one that's very close to all of our hearts, I guess, being women. So let's just unpack it a little bit more, though. So it's easy to say, all right, you're CEO of this wonderful company, but it sounds to me that, you are involved in problem solving, you've got the creativity, you've still got the curiosity at play. Your MBA certainly would have prepared you well. But what does your day look like as a CEO?
Anything and everything, I think, similar to everyone else on the panel. So you've got to be prepared to empty the bins and make all the strategic calls. And in the beginning, it was also, it was only me. So the technology has been invented by an amazing breast surgeon, Professor Christabel Saunders, and a brilliant team of engineers down at Perkins led by Professor Brendan Kennedy. And they worked together on it for a number of years before I saw it as an investor. And so then we worked together to create the business, and I moved in as CEO. But in the beginning, it was just me on the commercial side, so I was making all the decisions and having to do everything as well to make things happen. Now we've got a team of 15, so there's a lot of managing people, and yeah, it's the whole spectrum. And I love that we get to change what we do all the time.
Would you say that you're always the smartest woman in the room?
No. Never, no. And I try and as much as possible but recruit the smartest people I can possibly find to join the team. I'd be scared if I'd be the smartest person in the room.
No, the reason I've asked that question is I think we often see, especially on TV or Netflix and the like and TV shows, it's about that image of the CEOs sitting at the top of the boardroom table, a powerful team around them, and all they seem to do is just issue orders and then wander off. I think the reality is a little bit different from what I'm hearing.
Yes, completely.
All right, thanks for that. Now let's move on to Bec and introduce you, Bec, and what you do with Sandbar Co. Where did that idea come from, and tell us a little bit about the company, please.
Okay, so I had the idea of Sandbar Co about 2 years ago. It was in January 2019, and I was at the beach and I had a problem, which is where all of our businesses start. And I sat down at the beach and I had a beautiful macrame bag with me. And if you don't know what macrame is, it's got all the holes in it. And I put down my coffee cup and that fell over. My macrame bag filled with sand, and that involved my keys getting filled with sand. They were lost in there. My sunnies, I went for a swim and I didn't know where to put them. My phone overheated in the sun at the beach, and I just had all these first world problems. And I came back from my swim and I thought, gosh, how could I just get this macrame bag elevated? And how could I just have a nice little spot to put my coffee? And I was like, and then I could, whatever this thing is, I could then just put it into a nice little bag, and I've got everything that I need for the beach. So I had this idea, and I went home that night and I thought about it. And I went for coffee with my mum and my brother the next day. And we were sitting there talking, well, they were talking, and I was just concentrating, thinking, oh my gosh, what about this beach table? Like, I wonder if anything exists. And mum and my brother, Sean, were like, Bec, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I have this idea. And they were like, oh, here we go again. And I told them about it, and mum's like, do you need to leave? And I was like, Yeah, so I left and I went home and I started Googling, and there was nothing that solved all my problems for this beach table. So I went to Kmart and I bought some little things that I was going to go home and make my own little beach table with that I had in my mind, and it was awful. It was made out of pencil case holders and cut up bags, and I had this like little platter board over the top which was where to put my coffee, but I had the start of my beach table that at that time was called the sand, what did I call it, the sand top, and yeah, anyway, so then I had this idea and I was like, how do I get this idea from my head and this idea in front of me to an actual beach table for myself? So the first thing I did was I told everybody about it, because I was like, well, if I tell everyone, then now I have to do it. And I also asked for advice, and I asked my friends, like, have you seen something like that? And like, would you use it? And I needed to get that validation first, which was really important. And a lot of people said, yeah, there is tables out there and picnic tables that are absolutely beautiful, but nothing that folds up, that's lightweight and compact into a bag. I was like, I think I might have something here. So I didn't really know where to go from there. It was basically trying to find someone that can make it. So what helped me was, talking to people and finding out, like, who do I ask? Like, do I make it with plastic? Do I make it with timber? How do I make anything? I have no background in engineering or furniture making. And it was actually my gran who said, oh, I've got an engineer at my retirement village called Don, and I think he could help you. And I was like, oh, okay. So I met up with Don. Bless his heart. He's beautiful. And I think he's about 85. And I was telling him all about it, and I'm showing him pictures of this terrible thing that I'd made. And he's like, oh, yes, I'll have a go. And I was like, all right, great. A couple of days later, he called me. He's like, I've made you something. And I was like, what? I was like, all right, I'll come back. So I'm back to the retirement village, and Don had made me up this beautiful but awfully looking sandbar, and it folded up and it was compact, and it was exactly how I had envisioned it, but just not aesthetically pleasing. And then from there, at least I had this something that I could take to the beach, which was my only goal. I was like, I need this. And then from there, it's been a big progress of finding a manufacturer and getting to this point where I actually sell them. But yes, so that's how I came up with the idea of the sandbar and kind of how it progressed.
I love the story that you tied in, the aged care retirement home engineer there. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Never underestimate where you can get the advice from.
Exactly, yes.
Did anyone ever tell you not to go ahead with this? Did you ever get any naysayers?
Not really, no. I think most people that know me know that if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So I didn't really. Everyone thought it was quite a cool little concept. So I had a lot of support. I was very lucky.
And we should probably reveal that you're a bit of a serial entrepreneur anyway. This wasn't your first venture into creating something that's stuck in your head.
Yeah.
I hear that at the age of 6 you started selling something to your parents. Tell us more.
When I was 6, I thought it would be cool to make my own books and sell them to my family. So it would be literally 5-page books saying, this dog went to the park, and this dog went to the shops, and this dog went to town, and it would be the end. And then I'd write $3 and go up to whoever and ask for the money. And somehow at the age of 6, I knew that my granddad was quite well off, and I would go to his house and ask Mum for a pen. She'd always have one in her bag, and I'd cross out $3 and write $5 or $6, and give it to my granddad, and he would see that I've crossed out and it's gone up in value somehow in that car trip, and he would be like, okay, and he can pay for it. And then I used to bring them to school, and my teacher was thankfully quite supportive, and I had a little spot for all my books, so during silent reading people could read my books.
I love it. So really there, it's problem solving. You always saw an opportunity, and people might sit there, and some of the ladies in the audience or on live stream might be thinking, that's great, but Bec was just wired that way. Yeah, she wakes up in the morning and she just thinks of an idea and off she goes. What would you say to somebody, though, who says it doesn't come that naturally, but I am keen to pursue this, and how do I get that mindset? How do I build that entrepreneurial mindset if I'm not necessarily hyper-wired?
Well, I don't think I'm wired that way. I think I'm just, I guess I'm happy to make a mistake. And I mean, you've heard about one thing that has worked, and I've had a million of ideas that didn't work. So I think once you've found the passion you'll be fine, and you will always find a way. And if you believe in yourself, and you're happy to make mistakes and go with it. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like having support always helped me. Kind of lost my train of thought.
Having a rich grandfather.
Yeah, well, no, I never took any money from Grad except for the books. It's a complete exchange.
Brilliant. Well, there's some other wonderful stories in your journey that I'm going to unpack a little bit later. But let's move on to Elizabeth. Elizabeth Knight, founder and director of Purposeful. Now, your journey is somewhat different. You seem to have taken what could have been said the more traditional route. So, came out of school, ranked in the top 15 students in WA, so you aced your WACE, you won a scholarship, you went to uni, you did a degree with a double major, so we could say that your life was pretty much set from that point. And yet here you are running a business called Purposeful. Fill in the gaps for us. What happened, please?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. No one's read my path like that for a while. For me, that was my reality when I graduated from school. I had done really well on paper, and I guess on Instagram, like my life looked like it was all set, and I had these great opportunities in front of me. But the one subject that I didn't learn about in school was myself, who I was, what was my vision for the future, what was my values, what was I passionate about actually when I graduated, because I think I'd spent so much time working to achieve that perfect A-TAR score that in those last 2 years of school I'd completely lost sight of myself and who I was. And when I think back, that sort of those last 2 years are almost like a blip on the radar for me in my journey. I just completely lost sight of myself and really what was important to me. And so when I graduated, I was actually quite burnt out, and even though it felt like I was the only one going through that experience, I could see around me that so many other young people felt the same way and had no idea of how to figure out the path that was right for them. I was really stubborn and forced myself to figure it out, and I spent a lot of time with myself in that first year out of school getting to know who I was and realised that actually this was something that any young person could do, and arguably it would help them get closer to figuring out who that they wanted to be. So I sort of stumbled onto the idea of entrepreneurship, as probably most people here when you were at school. That wasn't like a career path that was talked about with your Year 10 careers advisor or anything like that. And the word entrepreneur to me sounded very masculine and very I didn't relate to that idea at all. But I found a group of other young entrepreneurs in Perth, and that was amazing because suddenly I realised, hey, you don't actually have to choose a job. You could create a job around something that you're passionate about, and even better, just a problem that you've experienced. And so I didn't start off with a solution for Purposeful at all. I just started off with this really painful problem that I was passionate about, and one arguably that was hugely systemic and complicated and difficult, but I had that drive to find a solution, and that was where it all began for me.
So the mission is putting young people in the driver's seat of their future. That's the way you put it. Now, I looked at your website and you talk a lot about the lost button. Tell us a little bit about the lost button.
Yes, that was one of those wild and wacky ideas that comes in the middle of the night. I would meet a lot of young people that were lost, and I think by putting that out there, that was kind of my brand. A lot of people would then find me and talk to me about the challenges that they were going through as well. And the lost button was really this idea of, well, what if you could actually, when you were feeling that way, that was someone you could go to get on-demand, personalised advice to help you get unstuck fast. And it wouldn't have to be comprehensive career coaching. It could just be something to nudge you in the right direction. And that was then what I tried to build and prototype. And I don't have any background in technology in terms of coding or anything, but I built it with a bunch of no-code tools. And similar to what Bec was saying, I had a whole bunch of people test it out. And from their side, it looked like a magic system that they get these magic solutions straight away. But on the back end, it was me smashing out all of these responses and advice for people, but just to see if it would work and if people would actually use it and value it, which they did. And then from there, it allowed me to kind of build it and automate it. And we're still in that process now, but it's just been an awesome way to, I think, similar to what Katharine was saying earlier, scale that impact. And I do a lot of presenting and speaking, but that wasn't enough for me because I wanted my impact to be bigger than just me and what I can talk about. And I don't think I'm the best person to give all the advice either often. So we're just there to facilitate other people, learning about yourself. And often it's just a case of reminding people of who they are, not giving them new answers.
Brilliant. And I think we heard that before, isn't it? Think big. I mean, Romy, it encouraged us to do that as well. So, there's a bit of a generational change of mind out there, I guess. And with the demographic and, young women who want to hear your story, say, yes, that's me. And I saw a few nodding heads there in the audience when you talked about entrepreneurship, and not quite sure why, but it resonates. How do you balance that expectation, or what advice do you give to young women where you say, yes, but the expectation is that I go down that more secure path or perceived secure path, that I get some experience, I do the traditional bit, and then at some point I should go and pursue my passion?
Yes, I still get this a lot. I get a lot of people sort of asking, when are you going to get a real job kind of thing? And this is the real job. I have to tell them, this is what I want to do. This is my dream job. Like, why would I give that up for something else now? I think that ultimately, like, if you're pursuing a path that isn't right for you, and deep down if it's not aligned, and I think we all touched on that moment when you realise that it has such a negative impact on you and all parts of your life, even if you don't realise it at the time. I really have a mindset of that idea of security, like job security, as we can see, is kind of a myth, and especially right now, there's not really any industry that's more secure than another for more than, a 6, 12, 18-month trajectory even. So we still make career decisions based on this idea that there's these secure paths, but there's just not. And I think another thing is that it's really hard to compete with passion. So if you hate what you're doing, or you're just doing it to make money, like, you're not going to be as competitive or as creative or as innovative as somebody who's doing it because they love it and they just really want to solve that problem. And the same applies just in your career, right? If you're in a job in that same way. So I think it's way more competitive and way more secure actually to pursue what you love doing. And a lot of people, it's really sad. It takes them maybe 10, 15, 20 years to have that moment where they just give them permission to try. And when you're young, there's no risk. Like, really, there's such limited risk compared to as you get older. And so I think just that advice of just getting started and giving yourself the space to learn and think about what that could look like for you is the best first step that you can take.
And not surprisingly, great advice. And nowadays there's so many support mechanisms out there that you can dip into, so it makes it a lot easier. I just want to remind anyone that's joining us on the live stream to make sure that you put your questions in the comments box so that we can feed that through. We've got some mics later on where we can share some of those questions as well. So let's go a bit broader now and talk about some of the fallacies. You touched on this, Elizabeth, with, it's not a real job. It's you're pursuing your passion, therefore it's a bit of a hobby as opposed to something that can become more tangible, until it is an overnight success 10 years later and then everyone says, yeah, I told you so. So what do you think are some of the big fallacies out there around being an entrepreneur? And maybe, Megan, can we flick it back to you to start off with this and see what your thoughts are?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is you have to always be hustling. And there's a lot of really visible entrepreneurs out there that are just like about the hustle, the hustle, the hustle. And if you think of people like Elon Musk, they might be uber successful, but have a look at their personal life. It's in shatters, like it's terrible. And I think you really have to try and have some type of a balance, and it's about working smarter, not harder, and identify early on what type of lifestyle or life that you want to live, and make sure that you stick to that. And there's a lot of other entrepreneurs out there that are really like focused on money as well, but I don't think that ever ends well. I'm a values-based business, and my values are first, and profit comes second, and profit will come if you are a values-based business, and don't ever go against your values as well, because it doesn't ever work out.
Kath, anything else from your perspective?
I think that was an excellent answer. I think it's always even once you're in the sort of entrepreneurial or CEO role, there are a lot of there is sort of a box that people can kind of expect you to do, and you'll get told, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, you should be out more, you have to work 24/7, you have to do this. And I think never accept that you have to do anything. You find your own way, just like what Megan says, be true to yourself. Don't let anyone else tell you how you need to go about doing something. And I think sort of some of the things, particularly with OncoRes, I've been told so many times along the way that you won't be able to get a deal out of the health department, you won't be able to build a team in Perth, you won't be able to do this, you won't be able to do that, and don't take it as a challenge.
Take it as a challenge, not as a block.
Yeah.
Bec, you describe yourself as an owner, founder, delivery driver, social media manager, web developer, and then the list just goes on. Do you have to be an expert to launch a business?
No, definitely not, and I am not. I think, as you just said before, work smarter, not harder, and really know your strengths and weaknesses. Whether you're sitting there and you've got an e-commerce idea or it's a service-based idea, I mean, if you can do it all, then fantastic. But there's a chance that you maybe don't know the marketing side, or you don't know how to build something, or you don't know the best location for your hairdressing salon, or whatever it may be. So understand what your weaknesses are, and then just get help. Like, find help, speak to people. As I said, if I didn't speak about things, I wouldn't have found Don, who made me this, and I wouldn't have made I don't know how to make things, so I did all the cold calls, which is tough and it's hustling. But then you find the person that can manufacture stuff. My accountant is amazing, and there's just people that I've got in my corners that help me. So I do wear all the hat with Sandbar for everything, but I get all the advice from other people, and I listen, and I love hearing when I'm wrong. Like, I love when someone says, oh, I don't know if that's right, Bec, and I'm like, really? Tell me why. Like, what could I have done better? Like, I love that. For an example, I had Sandbar's first markets a couple of weeks back. This elderly lady comes up to me and she's like, I don't like what you're doing here. And I was like, really? Like, what do you mean? And she's like, you've wrapped, because I'd wrapped the bags that I sell, and I also sell bucket hats and scrunchies, and I thought that I'd wrapped them really beautiful with bows and the tissue paper saying Sandbar on it. And she's like, you just don't know what's in there. And for me, of course, I knew what was in there, and I had wrapped it and merchandised it quite nicely in my head. But she was like, yeah, you need to display the bags, like all the bags, and have all the stock underneath. And I was like, yeah. And then I did that, and I listened, and I was like, the daughter was mortified. She was like, I'm so sorry about my mum. And I was like, no, it's great. Tell her to come back tomorrow and like give me some more advice. Anyways, and it worked, and I listened. And it's like, when someone says you're wrong, like, that's awesome. Like, listen to them, and they might not be right, so challenge them if you think so, but listen. And just seek advice, I think, is my biggest thing.
Definitely. Elizabeth, do you think that young women are more prone to be offered unsolicited free advice?
Yes, actually. I've had this happen a lot this week. I often actually had to explain to someone what mansplaining was. I'd come out of a mentor chat where I often get this thing where I'll barely say what I do. Like, I'll say, oh, Purposeful is this, and they'll be like, oh my God, that's great, I experienced this, and then they'll tell me like all the reasons why my business is like good, which is nice, but like all the reasons why I should be doing this and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's not mentorship. That's like very unsolicited, and often it's, it happens a lot, actually. I think I've had to take stock of, whose advice really matters as well. I think echoing what everyone said, yes, like, get as much advice as you can, but form your own opinion. And also don't, you can get into a really difficult mindset sometimes if you're getting all of the wrong type of advice from the wrong kinds of people, and you're surrounding yourself with people that don't align with your big vision and don't understand that, then you can get really disheartened by that. I think as a young woman as well, I've just had to get a lot better at being bolder, more ambitious, and stronger. For example, I'd often have chats where I noticed for a while, and I was often meeting with like older men, and they were in business and whatever, and they were who you were looking to as like the experts in the fields that I was in. And they would cut me off like before I finished my sentence, and I would just kind of back off and not finish the sentence, and then I realised that actually, no, just keep going and speak louder actually, and then it makes it awkward for them because they realise that they've cut you off. So that kind of thing, that it just comes from practice and doing it a lot of different times and failing, I think, and feeling awkward and horrible. You just got to keep at it and back yourself, I think. Yeah.
Any other experiences on the panel around gender playing negatively against you when you are trying to get your idea out there? You know, we talk a lot about gender bias, and I think, you know, you've got the double whammy of youth and gender is often seen as you're inexperienced and you're a woman. Any stories that you care to share, ladies?
Yeah, look, I was at an event once, and it was majority men, and that's the way it is when you go to events, I guess, networking events and things. And there was a man in who asked me what I do, and I had explained about Behind the Brands and how we're supporting female founders, and he was like, oh, that's really cute. There's a need for that, is there? And I looked at him and I was like, you have just answered your own question. And he was like, oh. And I was like, there is totally need. And I said, and it's not cute. And I was just like, the amount of times even like my members have been told that their products are cute, or that sounds like a little bit of fun. And these are people who've got like successful businesses, and it's just kind of like downplayed because they think, you know, they're doing it on the side. And it's not to say all men do that. They don't. But it's just sometimes it's a little bit harder to be taken seriously.
So what advice do you give to the ladies in the room when that happens? What do you do?
Ignore them. Just walk away and ignore them and just go, yep, that's okay, that's what you think, but I'm going to show you. You just can't take those things to heart, and just know what your why is and what your purpose and your mission is, and you'll show them.
Kath, you've come from the medical profession, which we know is still very much heavily male-dominated as well, especially in the more senior fields, and then you went into the investment area, which is even more male-dominated. Your experiences in this space, how do you deal with that when people perhaps don't expect you to be at the head of the company?
I think in terms of the head of the company part, I've definitely arrived at that at a time when there is a lot more support for female founders. There is a lot more excitement when I walk in, and it's like, oh, you're not a man. You know, this is exciting. You're different. You're, you know, and so that, I think, in terms of the timing, that's been great. I have definitely, to add to Megan's point, like, whilst just in general, I never think, gender is not something that I think about. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It matters what your purpose is, what you're doing, how you conduct yourself. Those are all so much more important than what your gender is. But the one funny thing is I have often been asked, well, what about doing prostates? So, or sat with investors, oh, that's nice about the breast. Is that really that, you know, is that important? And this has been in a big room with, how about prostates? Okay, thank you.
Another reason to invest, because there's room to diversify.
Yeah, exactly. Prostate's next.
2 breasts, 1 prostate? I don't know. I love that. And another thing I want to touch on, Kath, with you is the finance. And Bec mentioned that around, you know, having an awesome accountant to help you with the numbers. Again, rightly or wrongly, there's often a thought that, well, women aren't as good with numbers, or we're not as confident about the numbers and the finances. I'm sure it would help the audience to hear a bit of advice in that space. How important is it to know the basics? What do you need to know, and what do you need to get advice on?
Ooh. Well, that's where I get expert assistance. So I have a wonderful CFO who is female. The investment fund that I worked with, when I first saw OncoRes, that I still am a venture partner with, we are the whole back office, which is all the financial gurus, are all women. Half of the investment team's women. It was founded by 2 men, but as we've grown, they've kept equality and diversity is really front and centre of the way that they've grown, and a big part of that is making sure that all the men who work at Brandon as well have the equal opportunities to women, so the equal parenting opportunities, equal, you know, everyone has those opportunities. So definitely go get expert advice. I look at our tax return and then I say, Sophie, you'll make sure that all those numbers are right, because I know that, my signature goes on the bottom, but I've got someone I trust who has been through those numbers very diligently. And I think, finance more and more, we're seeing my husband's company, their CFO's a woman. There are so many women in finance.
There's plenty of help out there, and I think Lacey might have a few words to say on that topic as well later on, and may have a book to read actually as well. That could help. A bit of promo there. Do we have any questions coming in from our live audience, please?
Yeah, we do. We've got a couple of questions. So, Bec, how do I make sure storing my products doesn't take over my whole house?
It does take over your whole house. We actually have a sandbar room or two now. So the question is just how to make sure it doesn't store.
How do I make sure storing my products doesn't take over my whole house?
Okay, well, sell them. That's always a start. No, okay, that's good. So with Sandbar, I assumed that I would have like 100 and I would store them all in a storage shed and then I would start sending them out. And it just did not happen like that. And which is a good thing, because I learned from that my manufacturer can only he hand makes them one by one. So I only would take 5 or 10 at a time, come home, package them, send them out. So I guess, but my first initial plan was to have a storage shed. But now I've thankfully just got a spare room, which is just all my Sandbar stock. But yeah, that was going to be a challenge. And if I go back to my first business, which was a raw dessert company, again, I had a big garage. I was lucky enough to have 4 chest freezers there that stored all my products in. So you've got to have a plan. So whoever you are out there, like whatever you're planning on doing, really think about where it's going to go, because logistics is the hardest part. Like there's so much to think about.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I've got another question here, and Liz, you've kind of touched on it already, but this is for the panel. The E word, entrepreneur. Are you one? And why do women have trouble identifying as one?
I think it's something that, again, it's about confidence. And when I was working with a lot of young entrepreneurs, they would come and they would sort of want to work on our volunteer team and help other people, but they didn't want to do the programs themselves and be an entrepreneur because they didn't think they had an idea. They didn't think that they were good enough or capable enough. And I think also what we were talking about earlier in terms of that hustle culture, like for me personally, I thought that's not sustainable for me. I know that I'll burn out from that and I don't want that. So I think a lot of those masculine kind of stereotypes about being a founder and starting a business in that way and having to have all the answers before you start puts people off. But certainly we all know that you don't have to have any of the answers. It's even better if you're not the expert, like what you were chatting through, Bec, in terms of then you're open to actually new and better ways of doing something. The people that are like, I'm the expert and I have all the answers, don't learn and they don't make good decisions and they don't grow. So it's actually great to not know anything in a way, because you're more curious.
And to add to that, I always just say yes and then figure it out along the way. Like even for this, I've never done a panel talk before. So for me, it was like, oh, what an opportunity. And then I was like, oh my God, what have I said yes to? Like, what am I going to talk about? And then you just got to figure it out along the way. And life is made up of moments, and this is a moment, and we've got to live in it. So for me, it's like meeting awesome people. And if I can help one person or give some sort of advice, then that's it. So just say yes and then figure it out, because you will. I'll get help to figure it out.
I think the term entrepreneur for quite some time has had like a negative connotation, and it seemed a bit like wanky, to be honest. And the only entrepreneurs you would see were like the really old white rich dudes. But there's been kind of like a shift where you can see a lot more female entrepreneurs too, and that kind of changes people's perceptions of it.
Kath, are you an entrepreneur or a businesswoman? Do you get bogged down in that debate?
I'm always surprised if someone suggests that I might be an entrepreneur, because I'm like, well, don't you have to take this risk or that risk to qualify you to do that? And, because I moved across into a company, did I take enough risk on that? I take risk every day in every decision I make, but it's like, oh, I didn't have to risk my mortgage to start the case. Do you know what I mean? So it's funny what you set in your mind as what the definition of is, and then therefore how do you fit in.
semantics, isn't it?
It
And
is
perhaps the advice is
semantics.
pick the language according to the audience you're pitching to, you know, so, you know, create the right narrative for who's listening to you at any given time. Any other questions from the live stream?
So, a question for Liz. Did you receive pushback from those around you given your success in high school? Was there an expectation that you should go to university and follow a traditional path?
Yes, and there still is. I was very, I say lucky, but I also made my own luck that I got a really great job offer that I still have. And so it's kind of crazy. Like even people that are like closest to me still will be like, oh yeah, how's Purposeful? And so when are you starting like the job? And it's like maybe one day, but at the moment this is my passion and this is what fulfills me and this is what can give me impact. So that's what I'm doing, and I think just being firm about that. I think often though it only hurts when it's people that are close to you, and it's always people that are close to you because they care about you. So even your parents and your partners and all of that kind of thing, it's really important that you empathise with them as well. And I've definitely, particularly with my parents, they're so supportive, but they worry about you and they want you to be happy. And I think what I found was helpful was to just start doing it instead of like trying to get permission from people to start and for them to understand. Just do it and prove to them that, yeah, you can do it and I'm committed to this and it makes me happy and I can make money from it eventually. And not jumping all in at the beginning is also quite important because then it's easier to feel like you've failed if you jump straight into like doing it full time but you haven't got it all sort of set up for yourself yet. Then if you don't make money in 6 months, which you probably won't, then it can feel like you haven't given it a good enough crack. And I think it helped me to kind of ease into that process. So being at uni a couple of days and doing this a couple of days and until I finally went full time when I was like, yes, I know this is for me and I'm backing myself in it.
And Bec, you're still studying, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm still studying. I'm studying teaching at Murdoch.
So you're definitely juggling.
I'm definitely juggling, yeah. Yes.
Do you have to take a pause when you answer the phone as to whether it's going to be a business call or a friend?
Yes, sometimes.
Now, what about the audience here in the room? Does anyone have any questions for our panellists? Don't be shy. This is an awesome opportunity. Yes. Hang on a minute, we'll just get you a mic, just so that everyone in the live stream can hear as well. There you go, thanks.
Thank you. Catherine, I think you said that you transitioned from different professions. So what would be your biggest tips for transitioning from one profession to a completely different one?
Great question. So I guess I was really lucky that my boyfriend at the time, now husband, had done something similar. So he said to me, you just need to go out and talk to as many people as you can, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went and I just knew I knew clinical medicine wasn't right for me. I went and did an Institute of Fitness course. Maybe I was going to be a personal trainer. I really love fashion design. I went and investigated that. I thought about organisational psychology, went and talked to people about that. Applied for a bunch of graduate programs because I thought then I could get experience around a number of different, to Argyle Diamonds, and I could go through all and find out more. Because particularly with medicine, I'd had such tunnel vision on medicine. I go out with my friends, we talk about patients. It was very much, I had no idea what was out there in the world and what was available. I went and applied for some drug company work because I knew that I could, that would be a way also to enter the sort of business world in a good combination. And at the end of the day, because the last thing I felt like at that time is I was equipped to go and do yet another degree. I just spent 6 years at uni. The thought of doing another degree was just a bit overwhelming. And then, Alex had done his MBA, his friends had done their MBA. They had all changed their careers really dramatically by doing it. And so I made the decision to enrol in that, not knowing where it was going to lead me. I chose the MBA in the end because I thought it gave me the most general opportunities. I'd get to learn so much about so many different things. And also people coming into the MBA often are looking to change careers. They've come from a whole bunch of different disciplines. They're, a huge spectrum of ages. I was so nervous. I was 23 when I started the MBA. I was the youngest by far. 23 or 24. We had our first lecture, and they got us to break into small groups, and they're like, okay, so now you need to talk about this, this and that, and globalization. And I'm like, oh, I don't even know what that word means. There was no smartphone. Oh my gosh, I'm going to expose myself. No one's going to want me in their group. But yeah, so it's that for me was, so go talk to heaps of people, and then, hope, if there's a sort of passion or a way that you're leading, if there is a course, go investigate courses. Just be open to ideas, and it took me a while. Like, I went through the whole MBA still not knowing what I wanted to do until I did the venture capital course, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. It's super geeky. I love it. It's all about science, but it's with all this generalist business stuff. And then I was really lucky to get a job, having done the MBA, the VC thing. We had a panel of industry people come in, and I ended up getting a job in their venture fund. So we had to do presentations and stuff about a business plan that we'd created. And that was the first time I ever felt at home. When I started working at Stonebridge, I was just like, I found my place. I now know what it feels like to know that I'm doing something that I really feel comfortable with.
What a beautiful story. And I think it's a bit like it's a buffet, isn't it? You've got to try a couple of different things before you figure out which one's actually your favourite. You touched on something there, and I might throw to you, Megan, on this one, because you've been quoted as saying you want to change the narrative around female entrepreneurs and encourage us to stop playing small and it's okay to be ambitious. And your background is marketing. So what advice do you have to young women around how to market themselves? How do you create that brand that people believe in you?
I think it comes down to that word authenticity, and we hear it a lot, but it's true. You have to be authentic and you have to be yourself, because there's nothing worse than seeing something on social media and then you're meeting that person in real life and you think that is totally different. But I think there's a lot of societal norms that have been placed around women in entrepreneurship as well. And you're kind of told that, yep, just do a business on the side while you might eventually have kids, or maybe you're studying, and it doesn't have to be the case at all. So it's okay to be ambitious. There's always, sometimes when women, they're called ambitious, they get called like bitches or stuff like that, or they're tough, and it's not the case at all. Like, you don't have to have that masculine energy as well. Just be yourself. It's okay to want something, to have a big goal. And we always say that your true goals and dreams are the ones that you're too afraid to say as well, but get used to talking about them, and just know that you can do it, and you don't have to create a little business on the side. If you want to do that, that is totally fine. But if you want to have a multi-million-dollar empire, then go for that as well.
So true. And I know, Liz, you use the word audacious a lot, don't you?
Yes.
So any thoughts around how do we become more audacious?
Yeah, and authenticity, actually, that was my word too. I think that idea of, not being the smartest person in the room is really cool, and that can accelerate your growth and learning more than anything, because often I would be thinking, similar to what Megan was saying, like I'd be thinking this big, and someone like who's further along would help me to think about it this big, and that was awesome. And so we're in like an accelerator program at the moment that forces you to do that. It forces you to think, well, how could you make your first million? Like what if 10,000 people said they wanted to use what you do tomorrow? Then what would you do? And those are scary questions, but they force you to figure out the next step. I definitely adopt that approach of saying yes and then figuring it out. And actually, one of my team, the other day we had a meeting, and I was pitching, and I think as an entrepreneur you learn very quickly you have to pitch bigger than what you know and bigger than what you can deliver right now in order to get that next lead and that next opportunity. And she came away and she was like, "You're really good at talking about this as though we do it already." And I was like, yes, that's what you have to do. And it's not inauthentic at all. It's about pitching the vision and getting people to back you and be behind you. So I've gotten really good at doing that more and being comfortable with that, because the reality is that men do it all the time. all the time, like my counterparts in terms of like other men in this sort of space, and it is unfortunately a lot of the other young entrepreneurs are males. There aren't a lot of females in the education spot. They do it all the time, and it took me a while to realise that. And when I caught on, I realised, that's what you've got to do. That's how you win.
Thank you. Now, we've got time probably for a couple more questions before we have to wind up the panel session. So is there another one from our live audience, please?
We have another one about burnout. Has anyone on the panel suffered from burnout? How do you protect yourself and maintain balance?
Balance. Is there such a thing? I think a couple of years ago I was heading towards burnout when I was in my marketing agency, because I was just sort of working eye on the prize, and it was something I wasn't enjoying. But I have learnt very fast that I don't think there's such thing as balance. Some week it's going to be swinging one way, and the next week it's going to be the other, and you have to be totally okay with that. The issue comes when it's in one direction for too long. I follow a entrepreneur called Michael Hyatt, and he actually has a really amazing take on balance as well, when he talks about having different quadrants in your life that are important to you, that are like family and friends, could be work, could be exercise, could be fun, and working out how many hours a week you actually need in each of those quadrants to feel fulfilled. And so if we were to have true balance, if you wanted to, study 6 hours a day, then you would have to go to the gym 6 hours a day. But there's no such thing as the true balance. But in reality, it might be that you only need to go to the gym 45 minutes 3 times a week. So just figuring out what's important to you in those quadrants and how many hours that you want to spend in there, and know that things can change and you just have to constantly be working on it. But I know for a lot of entrepreneurs, they just work 24/7 and they hit burnout super fast. You have to actually have a life outside of your business. Otherwise, you're not going to sustain it.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the panel?
I definitely have, and I certainly agree in terms of being purposeful, literally, like no pun intended, but actually understanding what are your values, and balance for you looks different to what balance for me looks like, and that's okay. You've got to go. Doesn't have to be equal time for each box. It's about the value for you and how much it fulfills you, and so that can look different. And we talk about this a lot. So with our podcast, actually, all these topics like burnout, authenticity, career experimenting, all of that stuff, to actually go, okay, what are the stories of young people that are experiencing this too? Because we don't talk about them at all, and we really should do a lot more, because that's often all that it takes for someone to give themselves permission to slow down and just do what's right for you and what fulfills you most.
Absolutely. I think it's so important that we do talk about that vulnerability, and that everything is not always perfect. And just because you're sitting up on a panel doesn't mean that they've got all the answers and have got it right every single day of the year, isn't it?
Oh, we always laugh and say if we actually had like a camera follow me around, it would just be hilarious, because my life at home is a mess. But I also put that on social media. That's the reality of it.
It's so true. Now, do we have any other questions here in the room? Yes, we've got one more. Just wait for the mic for a second. There we go, thanks.
I was wondering how much you had to save up in order to start your business, and how you got there. What did you do to make that money?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I guess the money situation is depending completely on what your goal is. So if, like, for example, when I had my first business, it was a raw dessert company, and I didn't have a lot of money to start up with, so I would just make what I could and then slowly grow and expand. So I didn't need a lot. With something like this, product and development is very expensive when you're paying someone to develop it. It's not me at home putting screws and nails together. That I would have loved that. So I knew that I needed a lot more money for that, so that was my savings. But yeah, I think scaffolding and starting small, depending on what you're doing. If you're a hairdresser, for example, you're not going to go and open a salon and hire 12 staff. You're going to wash someone's hair at home, and you're going to cut it, and you're going to get reviews, and you're going to learn your mistakes, and you're going to slowly expand. But that I don't have experience in pitching for money and things like that. So yeah, I can't give any feedback for that, but I think for me, I had a goal. I knew how much money I had to spend, and I had a cash flow, and I knew where the money was going, and I knew when I was going to get to the end. And it's very, very scary, because when you get to that end and you're like, I don't have a lot left, this has to work, then you make it work. You somehow find the way. So have a plan. Definitely business plans are really important. I didn't really know how to do them at the beginning. I learned at Murdoch, actually, and really strategize where your money's going would be my advice.
Thank you. And I know that it's almost a perfect segue to our keynote speaker, who's an absolute gun in this space. So we're going to have to wrap up the panel conversation. I'm going to ask each of you to comment on a closing question I have, and it's a generic one, but I think it's an important one for the audience to hear. And what's the best bit of advice you've ever given to yourself? Because I think often it's about that little voice inside of our head, or, you know, what is the bit of advice that works for you when you're looking in the mirror before a big meeting, before a big pitch, before something that's really important in your business? Elizabeth, I think you're nodding. You've got an answer.
I always get asked this question and I'm never prepared for it. I think for me, like the mantra I kind of live by is cliche, but you never know like how much, no one knows how much time you've got or we've got on this planet, and it just seems so silly to waste so much of that time doing something that you don't love or that isn't fulfilling you. So I really keep that in mind almost every day, like actually remembering that we're not here forever. Like don't waste your time doing things that aren't fulfilling to you. Just start today. Don't wait 12 months into the future before you get going. And that always gives me the push I need to just do it.
Brilliant. Bec?
For me, celebrating wins. For my partner and I, every night, we don't drink every night, but if I have a glass of wine, we always cheers to a win. Like, it's always the little things. So, if you're nervous in the morning, think about how far you've come. Like, you guys are here today, that's already a massive win. And everything that I do, I always think, you know what, I'm better off than what I was yesterday. So, win and celebrate how far you've come.
Thank
Positive.
you.
I guess, I love both of those, and those two are definitely similar. Celebrate every success, and you're not here forever. It's so important. I guess the other thing I'd say is just be open. You never know where some help or ideas going to come from. Take every meeting, talk to everyone. But I want to say one other thing, just knowing that every step of the journey I've been terrified. So don't think because I'm sitting up here that I haven't been scared to take every single step I've taken. So don't ever let fear hold you back.
I actually have two mantras that I live by, and I play them over in my head quite often. And one is everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. And then the second one that I tell myself in my head when I'm kind of unsure is, she stood still, remembered who she was, and then the game changed. And that's what I think. And then my little third one is I look at my kids, especially my daughter, and think that I want to be a really great role model for them. And I can kind of see that now, because when she was a bit younger and I'd say to her, come on, we've got to go to kindy, she'd be like, Mum, hang on, I'm on the phone to a client. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I've done my job here.
Love it. And I think role modelling, and you're all, each and every one of you are such fantastic role models, so thank you for sharing your time today. During the break, I'd encourage you to hit up Bec and ask her about her $20 note that she framed. There's an interesting little story in there. We don't have time to unpack it. And the other bit of my throwing in advice would be, if you want to read a book by Amy Cuddy, she's got a book called Presence. And it's a really easy read and a great book on how you can prepare yourself to walk into situations that make you feel uncomfortable. And it's been bestseller around the world. I love it, and I've got a lot of young women reading it that take a lot out of it. So on that note, please join me in thanking our gorgeous panel for being so generous, so open and so honest. We didn't touch on the question about why women are so valuable, but I think the answer lies in the conversation that we've had. And it's that passion and that goodwill and that vision that you all bring in making the world somewhat better in your own ways that really is proof as to why we need more women out there like that. So please, a big hand of applause. Now I'm going to hand over to another powerhouse of female entrepreneurs. She's a friend of mine, and I'm absolutely thrilled that she's here. We've got Lacey Filipich with us. Lacey is a chemical engineer. She's turned entrepreneur, and she has a goal to educate people about money. That's her absolute passion. 2 businesses that Lacey has founded. One is called Money School. The other one, Make a Kids Club. And she's taught thousands of people from more than 32 countries about financial literacy. So get your pens ready, ladies. Now, so successful are her companies that the barefoot investor, Scott Pape, who many of you may have heard of, wanted to buy her idea. And Lacey was audacious and brave enough to say no, she's going to do her own thing, and knocked him back. Now, her inspiring and very informing TED Talk has had over 880,000 views. She's written a book about how to stay out of debt. And in 2019, she was awarded the winner of Business News 40 Under 40. And she's also one of our fabulous role models from Women in Technology in WA. So she's here today to tell us about how to engineer a time-rich life. And again, Lacey will take questions at the end of this, so please feel free to ask her lots of things about startup funding, finance, debt, and how to make money work for you. Welcome, Lacey.
Thank you very much for that lovely, warm welcome. And I'm feeling pretty inspired by the panel. It's one of those things when you spend some time around this kind of environment, I hope you guys feel the same. The variety of the responses and the different paths everyone took really reminds me that there's lots of ways to get wherever you want to go, and hopefully you find some things that connect with you today. I'll start off, and please don't panic because I use black slides a lot in my PowerPoint. It will go black intentionally. Okay, I haven't lost the slides. When I was your age, I had no idea that I would eventually become a founder. I genuinely did not see this in my future. And I actually thought I'd end up as the CEO of BHP one day. That was my aspiration, to run a giant global company and be in a boardroom. I thought that'd be fun, which probably makes me sound a bit strange. Certainly not looking likely that I'll end up that way these days. Which is not to say that I never found entrepreneurship interesting. I really did, and you've heard that today on the panel. I started my first business when I was 10, and it was because I went to the local markets and I wanted to get a hair wrap. And I have to put a photo up so that you know what they look like, because they're kind of old-fashioned now. But I sat at the markets and I didn't have enough money to get one. And so I sat there and watched them and saw how they did it, and then just decided I'd copy them. And so I started doing hair wraps at home for my friends, but only charging them half the going rate. And before I knew it, there were 5 of us working on a stall at our school fete. That's me doing hair wraps at 10 years old. And we made $300 in a day, which is pretty good fun. And I was being the boss, of course. I definitely have bossy skills, no problems about that. Telling my friends exactly what to do and critiquing their work. Sorry, guys. But it was lots of fun. On the way to that school fete, when I was 10, my mum, who I made help me for free, I didn't pay her anything, on the stall, and how's that? Lovely perm, well done, Mum. She asked me what I was going to do with the money that we were going to make that day. And she thought, I better get her thinking about this. And I was like, I don't really have a plan. And so in the car on the way, she told me about compound interest, which was a revelation. She actually described it like rabbits breeding, the speed with which it picks up. And of course, back then you were getting interest of 7 or 8%, not the pitiful 1% you might get today. I tell you, my eyes lit up. And I was like, the bank gives you money for putting money in the bank? What? But it started a habit that I began that day, which is every time I get $1, I keep half of it. I only spend the other half. The half that I save, some of it I keep in cash, but most of it I invest in assets. And I started at 10 investing in a mutual fund. And you've already heard I bought my first property when I was 19, kept buying those, started investing in shares when I was 24. It's a habit that has become so deeply ingrained that I no longer have to think about it. It's just every dollar that comes in, half of it's going to be invested. And I'm pretty much like the proverbial squirrel, and I'm very cheap to run. So it's not a problem for me to save that much money. At school, I loved anything that was related to problem solving. I honestly got such a kick out of problem solving. And so no surprise that I adored maths and physics at school. and found myself in my final year on the Australian team for the International Young Physicists Tournament, which I lost for Australia because I choked and wouldn't get on stage and speak. So don't worry if you've ever failed. You haven't lost an international tournament for Australia. You're doing better than I did, okay? Don't panic. I did not know what I wanted to do when I was leaving school. I had no idea. And back then they used to give you a book that looked like a part of a phone book, that kind of thin paper, and it had all the courses on offer. And so I went through and ripped out all the pages I didn't like and got rid of about 98% of the pages. And what was left was engineering, which I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea. I didn't know any engineers. I knew a lot of scientists in my family, but no one who did engineering. But I was promised lots of problem solving. That was on every page. And so I thought, I'll give it a crack. So I did. And then in my second year of university, you had to pick a specialty. Again, I hated 10 of the ones that were on offer. I was like, I don't want to do electrical, that's awful. And I didn't particularly like aerospace, but chemical looked okay, and I picked that, and I'm just lucky that it fit me like a glove. My class was half male, half female, and we're talking about in the early 2000s, so don't buy the BS about there's no girls in engineering. There's a lot of them, okay? And it was a fantastic experience for me. I adored the work. And one of the best things about that work is that you get to wear hardiaka, which you don't have to iron. And everyone looks unattractive in it, so it doesn't matter how you look. It's really lovely. And I just adored the problems I was getting to solve on site. I had so much fun with them. And so it was a really sensible decision for me to move from Brisbane, in the city where I'd lived, to Kalgoorlie, the Wild West, which I couldn't have even placed on a map, and start working in the mining industry. After a couple of years of work, it became very apparent that I have this really niche skill, which is I know how to make more tonnes or produce more money, basically, without spending money. So I got moved around from site to site to squeeze as much as I could out of equipment and people. And I do this because I smile a lot, and it puts people off guard in the mining industry because they're used to grumpy old dudes. And through force of personality, I do it's called business optimization or improvement or Lean Six Sigma. But basically, it's making more money without having to spend money from the capital that you have. I'm obsessed with reducing waste. And being really good at it, they decided to make me an experimental internal consultant, because consultants cost a bomb, right? Kath's husband is very smart, having gone into management consulting. They're really expensive. And so if they can get people within the organisation to do that work, they save a lot of money, so they'd ship me around. And in my last internal consulting stint, when I was in 2008, I was starting to wake up tired. I'd get up in the morning and I just have to drag myself out of bed. And I told my boss at the time that I needed a break. I'd done 14 months straight. I would work 50 to 60 hours a week, often wouldn't have weekends, and I had not had like a holiday at all. And I was getting in trouble with HR because you're supposed to take your leave and they want you to take it. And I had said to him I needed a break, and he said, you can't. We have a 6-month project. You have to see it through. You can't take a break. At 6 months you can. And of course, in month 4, I went down like an absolute ton of bricks. I was pretty much bedbound for a month. And in week 4, I wondered if I would ever have a normal life again. And it was horrible, disempowering. And in your mid-20s, it's this horrific experience because you think you're invincible, right? And suddenly you go, oh my gosh, I'm not. I was so relieved in week 5 when I finally started to feel better. A year later, I learned it was actually a virus that I'd had. Everyone thought it had been an infection, but it wasn't, and it just had to run its course. And it's left me half deaf in my right ear. And while I was trying to get better, I went off to the dentist, and he discovered I'd split both of my rear molars in half from grinding my teeth from stress. So I have lovely mouth bling now, 2 gold crowns on my back teeth. So there I was in my mid-20s with 2 irreversible health impacts. I thought, this is stupid, and took 3 months off and went backpacking around South America. And it really opened my eyes to what was beyond work and beyond Australia. And so again, I was irreversibly changed, but this time in a really good way. I came back to work wondering how I could make that a more regular thing. How could I take more of these breaks? But I was really re-energised by the experience. So I was keen to get back to work, and I was excited to be back doing my thing. But then 3 months into that, real disaster struck. And it was that my little sister, who was 24 at the time, decided to end her life. And there's nothing quite like losing a loved one to have what you heard Liz say before really come home to you. You get one shot at this life. You will not choose, most of the time, how you leave. And if you've only got one shot, you have to make the most of it. And that was like one of those aha moments for me, that coming off the back of me burning out genuinely just made me think, I've got to redesign my life. And so I did. And I did what I'd been doing to all those mine sites and those processing plants and all those poor people I nagged all the time to do better with their jobs. I decided to apply those skills to my life. How could I build a life that was designed in a way that I would make the most out of the time that I have? In 2010, I started, first of all, by quitting my job with nothing to go to. I thought, well, we'll take a risk. It can't go too wrong, can it, surely? And I did just decide I'd leave. And out of that, I discovered that it was possible to do consulting externally, management consulting, and work half the year. So that's what I did. I started working in the Australian winter, and then in summer, I would go move down to the Margaret River region and have 6 months off. I did that for 3 years. And of course, at the time, all my friends were going, how come you don't have to work all year round? That's not fair. I have to work like a dog and I only get like 4 weeks off a year. And I was like, yeah, that does suck. We'd start talking about it. And I'd ask them, oh, well, what were you doing with your money? And they'd talk to me about debt, mostly. The credit cards, bills they'd racked up, the car loans they'd taken, the money they were spending that they weren't getting joy out of. And I was like, wow, well, I've been saving and buying property in shares. And how come you don't know about that? And that was the first time I really realised that not everybody gets the financial education at home that I'd gotten, and I'd just won the ovarian lottery with my mum. You know, not everybody gets that. And so that was the problem that I spotted, and that's a common theme you've heard today, right? Spotting a problem. And I just could not sit by. And I do encourage you to find a problem that you obsess over, that you have to leave coffee with your family for, okay? Find something that drives you like that, because it will keep you going. In that first 6 month break, I founded Money School with my mum because I wanted to fix this financial education problem. My first product was a book for kids about saving. So you'd read it and the kids would go, oh, I know why I need to save now, and they'd fill out a tracking chart. I self-published it and then I was too embarrassed to promote it. So I didn't actually mention it to people for about 6 years. I was too embarrassed to stand up and say, this is my baby. Because when you create something, you're really putting your soul out there. And you can take it personally if people don't like it. It's a good advice to not worry too much about that. So I'm a bit stupid for waiting that long, but I still have the book and people still buy it now. My first website was absolutely hideous, and I went to the Wayback Machine to grab this for you just to prove it. I was so proud of this website, but look at how horrendously ugly it is. And I spent a lot of money getting help to build it, by the way. And I'm showing you that just so that you know we all start somewhere. When you go to my website today, you won't recognise any of that. It looks totally different, but it's a necessary step to start out with the first really crappy thing. So just see it as that, is my advice. Even though I didn't really understand marketing or promotion, as an engineer, I was used to talking, in dot points and numbers. I started to get comfortable with it and I'd get really creative, and I had a lot of fun designing a curriculum for how I would teach people the way that my mum had taught me about money. So I didn't want to try to go through schools because it's basically really hard work and I didn't really want to do that. I love the education system, but it's not ideal for entrepreneurs. Before I knew it, though, I had a business. I was calling myself a founder and director. I had a website. People I didn't know were booking into my courses, and I was losing money hand over fist, but I was doing something that I adored. So I didn't care. By the time I had my daughter in 2013, the income from my assets was enough to cover my living costs. So the shares that I owned were paying dividends, the properties that I owned were paying rent, and suddenly work became optional. I didn't have to go back to work because I didn't need a wage to survive. Now, I have mentioned I'm cheap to run. I'm not talking about having 200 grand a year. I only need 60 grand a year and I'm happy. Like, that's what our family is happy living on. But when you don't need that much, just having those assets and all that money I had saved was now working for me and will continue to work for me for the rest of my life. So I get to choose what I do. I get to choose how I spend my time. And I think that's probably the most important thing that's happened. I did take 18 months off my business to be with my daughter, and then my mother thought I sounded bored on the phone. So she moved over from Queensland to Perth to come and help me with looking after my kids so that I could enjoy that as well as running the business. When my son came along 2 years later, I realised I couldn't keep doing face-to-face content delivery. It just wouldn't work. I wouldn't get enough time with my family if I was going to do that. So I started taking my courses online. And when I look back at those first videos, which are so bad I can't show you, like They're 5 years old, and I cringe remembering them. They're the most awful videos ever, in my opinion, but I made them. And I sold them because I was like, this time I'm selling something. I'm not going to sit back and just wait for people to come to me. And people watched them. And when they watched them, they told me how they were changing their lives. They were getting out of debt. They were starting to save, and they were buying these assets. And I was like, even if I'm really embarrassed, I have to do this. I have to keep going. Some clients also told me about how their kids, because I tell these parents, don't give your kids money for nothing. It's got to be some sort of, exchange of effort or, entrepreneurialism in the way they get that money. And so these kids were disgusted with a low amount that they were getting from mum and dad. So they started businesses. And that's what ended up inspiring Make a Kids Club. I had Ash, who called me up and said, Lacey, do I need any insurance because I'm making lip balm? And I was like, yeah, you probably need to talk to Therapeutic Goods. You probably do need some insurance. All right, yeah, cool. She's 10. Oh, wow, okay, this is advanced. She started asking me about markets and managing stuff. I said, Ash, what's going on? She said, well, I've made $3,500 selling this lip balm at my local church. And I couldn't find anyone to help her with business stuff. Club Kidpreneur would not come to the West Coast. They would only do in-person courses. And so that's where Maker Kids come from. Another problem that I just couldn't leave for these kids that were going, how do I do this business thing? They're much more sophisticated than me. I definitely never went on radio or TV. So I have high hopes for them all. In 2017, I noticed that my brand Money School was getting better known. And I guess that was, the barefoot investor coming along and saying, hey, I'd like to buy Money School. And it was delightful to be able to tell him no because of my values. I really dislike his take on money and marriage. I think it's dangerous for women. And just for the record, joint accounts are optional. Everyone, do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Okay? Optional. You can have them if you want. Optional, not compulsory. Even though I'd had this attention, it still felt a little bit like I was screaming into the void when I published a blog. So I'm not sure there ever comes a point where you suddenly feel successful. I don't think I've got there yet, but it was nice to see at least people were listening. Then in 2018, 4 things happened. Penguin Random House approached me to write a book, which later became Money School. So that's the book about financial independence, and read it if you like. See, really good at selling, aren't I? Read it if you like. Please buy my book if you get a chance. I was also offered a speaking spot at TEDx UWA. Now, TEDx's are all over the place and you never know how they're going to go. Liz is a TEDx speaker. If you guys want to do a TEDx talk, if you've got something you're passionate about, you can. What is rare is when something connects, and I didn't really realise that people were watching it because most of them get uploaded and get watched about 1,000 times, which is usually my mum, probably, I would have thought, watching it again and again and again. But it seems to have resonated, which really makes me feel like I'm solving a problem that people care about. It's a little bit of reassurance. I also won a scholarship to Curtin Ignition for Maker Kids, and there I gave my first ever business pitch. I'd never done one before, but it turns out I'm good at them. And I won one of the top 3 spots, which meant I got to pitch to Bill Tye, who is a Canva investor and Zoom investor. And so that was a pretty unique experience, giving my second business pitch ever in front of him, though I'm never asking anyone for money because I like being my own boss. I also got through to the Australian finals of Pitch at Palace, which Murdoch hosted. And if you look at that photo later on, if you get it close enough, you'll see Kath and I in the crowd there. Kath won the international one and got to pitch at Buckingham Palace. So it's a pretty impressive pitching contest, and lots of fun. So cut to 3 years later, here we are. I get to choose how I spend my time. I choose to spend my time teaching people about money because I think it's going to have a massive impact. If you guys know how to manage your money, you'll be able to chase those dreams because you won't be worried about whether you can afford your rent or to eat. That's the important thing for me, cover your basic costs. Even more exciting is getting to choose things like my husband is into his 3rd year of a mini retirement. So he's the house husband effectively by choice. And he loves it. And we get to spend heaps of time with our kids. I can choose to volunteer. I can choose to be part of my kids' school sports carnivals. I can do whatever I want. It's the biggest freedom that I can imagine, and I hope you all get to experience it at some point. Now, I have talked longer than I probably should have, but I'm going to finish with the 5 points that I want to share with you today, some tips. I could talk about the Jill of all trades thing, because you really do become a Jill of all trades. You have no choice, because it's too expensive to hire people at the beginning, so you have to do it all yourself. But these are the things that help me when things get tough. And they will get tough if you decide to solve a problem through a business, which is what entrepreneurship is. If you decide to do it, it will get tough. Be prepared. Here are my 5 tips. Oh, sorry, I totally missed my slides. Anyway, less haste, more speed. That means life is the longest thing you are ever going to do. When someone says life is short, you have to think, compared to what? What are you going to do that's longer than your life? Nothing, are you? So make the most of it. Do not rush it unnecessarily. Resist that hustle culture until you know you're working on the right thing. Okay? You do not have to be productive all the time. Being creative and exploring is part of finding what you love. That said, once you find the thing you want to solve, take a note of Parkinson's law, which basically translates to the work will take the amount of time you allow for it. If you give yourself 6 months, it will take 6 months. If you give yourself 6 minutes, it will take 6 minutes. You would be amazed what you can achieve with an ambitious deadline. I wrote my manuscript, the first one, 85,000 words, and we're talking about an engineer here, right, who normally does numbers, 85,000 words in 7 weeks, right? You'd be amazed what you can do. Give yourself that tight deadline when you know you're on it. Because I'm a financial educator, there has to be a money tip, and it's this. Money is a tool only. In and of itself, it has no meaning or value. It is what you do with it, and I think the highest use of money is to buy back your time so you can decide what you're going to do instead of slaving for a wage doing something you don't love. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to always be happy and doing things that you love all the time. Sometimes there's grind, even when you love something. But that's the point of the money you're accumulating, so that you can choose and you can be time rich. Now, that's not just about business stuff. Last year, I was able to shut down Money School to care for my mother for 4 months and then eventually grieve her when she passed. And out of that, I'm reminded that pain is inevitable. Misery is optional. The pain is coming for you. Life sucks sometimes. You'll face critics who hate you, trolls who just want to stir up some crap. You'll miss out on grants, you'll miss out on investment deals, and you'll miss contracts. Competitors will copy you, they'll infringe on your intellectual property, or even worse, they will come up with a solution that's better than yours. It's going to happen. You'll say no to epic opportunities because they go against your values. You'll lose sleep, you'll get sick, you'll lose people. You'll wonder if it's all worth it. Trying to avoid that pain is futile. It just makes you sick. Embrace the pain. Try to learn what you can from it. Have a good old wallow. You do you, boo, whatever you want to do. But afterwards, get back up. Okay? You can be in pain and not be miserable. It just takes practice. And 2018 was a turning point and helped me realise this, not because of all those opportunities, but because I realised that entrepreneurship is actually a team sport. We get sold this idea that it's a triumph of one person, but it is not. You need your business besties. You really do. And treasure them. It took me this long to learn that. So for a smart woman, sometimes I'm pretty dumb, but you'll get there eventually. Let me save you some time and tell you to go find it. Having my friends that I've met through Ignition, through Pitch at Palace, that I've met through my parents' groups at the school, means that I've got people I can talk to honestly about the problems I'm facing and hear about theirs, and we can help each other. And you don't have to airbrush or worry about spin or the filters that everybody puts on everything. The good news is you're in the right place to start. The Accelerator for Enterprising Women is an excellent initiative, and there's a very good chance that you're going to meet someone in this room today who might be a future biz bestie. You can help each other and feel good. I hope you do find them earlier than I did, and may your life be richer for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lacey. I told you were in for a treat. I didn't lie.
Sorry I went over time.
That's all right. We're over time, but, we've got a few good questions here that I do want to sneak in. I'm going to start with one from the live stream audience while you ladies think about what you want to ask Lacey. How much money do I need to start a business, Lacey?
Technically zero. I love, there's a great tweet. Everyone thinks you've got to get investment and you've got to have all this capital. Sell something, okay? Sell the idea or the prototype first without investing too much time and energy in it. And once you get proof of customers, then you know it's a viable business, then invest. Do not be sinking thousands of dollars into a website before you've tested your prototype. And when you sell some things, then you'll have the cash to run the business. That said, do not put yourself into financial distress. If you're worried about not being able to eat or pay your rent, then you are not in a place yet to take massive financial risks. You need to build up a little buffer fund of savings, which might only be a month's worth of living costs. It's up to you. Depends on what you need to sleep well. Have a bit of savings so that you'll be able to eat.
Okay, so I've started my business. So then how can a young founder keep saving while building and growing the business?
Well, pay yourself first is the golden rule there. So before you pay the bills, before you pay anybody else, you pay you. You keep some of every dollar that you earn, because if you don't, there'll be nothing for your future. You are the highest priority. Everything else comes later.
And at what point should they get an accountant? Right at the beginning, once it starts growing, or only if you're not good with numbers?
Okay, no one is not good with numbers. So everybody say that to yourself. I am good with numbers in your head. You don't have to say it out loud. I won't make you do it. Finance is addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. It's year 5 maths. If you got through primary school, you have every skill you need to know your numbers, okay? There's nothing complicated about it. I can say that as a chemical engineer who's done the proper complicated stuff. Finance is straightforward. The thing about when you want to get advice is I do think when you set up the company, and if you don't understand how companies work, it's important to get advice, because people can make costly mistakes in that setup. So I think right at the beginning it's worth getting some advice. That said, once you have your systems in place, you can run everything yourself these days. It's super simple. I ran my business on a spreadsheet for 10 years. Only went over to 0 this year. It's not hard, okay, to do it yourself. You just need someone to help you get set up if you don't feel confident. There are lots of people who are advisors who will donate their time to help steer you in the right direction. Tap into networks like this and find them.
Thank you. Words of wisdom. Any questions from the audience? Yes. Just wait for the mic behind you. Thank you.
Hello,
Hi.
Lacey. Oh my goodness, I love your talk. Thank you. And I remember actually watching your pitch video on YouTube. It wasn't as bad as you make it out. It was actually quite impressive. Your talk today has really triggered a lot of questions for me. I'm actually working, and we've had some interesting conversations with other women. Now, I come from a very multicultural and diverse community. And this idea of financial literacy, particularly for women, and then those who are coming from marginalised communities and experiencing additional barriers. And yet it seems to be such a fundamental skill. In your opinion, why is it that money seems so scary or mysterious? We ourselves have those blocks inside of our minds and our hearts. Because you seem to just make it seem so effortless. I mean, you're talking about 10 and your mum, and how did you get to that place? And what advice do you have for women who may not have that kind of relationship with money, that perhaps we might point to men and say, that seems really second nature. Mm-hmm. But it's really rare for me to find a woman like you who inhabits that. That's actually, like, I'm so excited. I need to read your book. I need to catch up with you. I want to have a longer conversation. But those are some of my questions and my thoughts just for now.
Awesome. I'll answer quickly on a few of those points, hopefully, and we can talk afterwards in the break. So first of all, why do people find money overwhelming? I'm going to give you the cynics version. There is an entire industry vested interest in you not knowing what to do. They want to charge you advice fees, and they want to charge superannuation fees, and they want to take some of your hard-earned cash. So that's the cynics view. There is an entire industry whose vested interest is making it look hard so you will pay them for advice. Now, that said, it's a very cynical view, and I'm probably going to get bollocked by a bunch of financial advisors now, but too bad. There are wonderful ones out there as well. But you've got to remember that that's the message that so many people who are competent with this stuff have to project, because if you suddenly become knowledgeable on that, you don't need their services anymore. They do themselves out of a business. And it's like hundreds of billions of dollars. So that's part of it. The second part is when people tell themselves that they're not good with numbers, stop telling yourself that. Somewhere in your primary school ages, you might have decided that you are not good at maths for reasons that are beyond me, but I know there's a lot of analysis in it. And they carry this belief. Only 5% of money is about the maths. Most of it is about your values and your ethics. Okay, so if you think that money and finance are connected, it's a very loose relationship, guys. Don't focus on that part. And I think because it's common for women, unfortunately, to think they're not good at maths, erroneously, I think, most of the time, but they associate money with that, and that's where that block comes in. And I do think there's a lot of societal norms in different cultures about what is okay for a woman's role to be. We have to challenge that, and we have to make everybody in society realise that when all of us know more about money, it's better for everybody, because then we waste less. We make the most of the resources we've got. And the only people who want to keep you away from money are people who want to control you. So you've just got to keep that in mind. I think that's probably about as much as I can give you that one. We'll talk about the rest later.
Thank you so much, Lacey. I know there's lots of questions. I would say let's hold them. If Lacey's got a few minutes to stick with us over lunch, I'm sure you can pick her brains. But definitely I encourage you to read the book. I've given the book to both of my adult daughters to read, and they're working their way through it at the moment. So big round of applause for the amazing Lacey.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us now to the end of our live stream component of today. Oh, I've got too many mics here. Hang on. One too many mics. There we go. That's better. I want to thank, before I move to the audience in the room, thank our live stream audience. Thanks so much for joining us today. I do hope that you got some really valuable nuggets of advice out of there. I'm sure if you contact any of our panellists on the social media channels, you'll probably get a response from them, so don't be shy in sending through your questions afterwards. And I do want to point out that the Accelerator for Enterprising Women is also hosting 2 free workshops next week, which will help you build out on your ideas. They're going to be held on the 16th and 17th of August, also at Murdoch Uni. So if you want more information about that program or about anything else of the Accelerator, I encourage you to hop on to enterprising-women.com.au, and hopefully you've taken away what you needed in order to keep that journey going and understand that you are not alone out there in wanting to make that dream come through. So good luck, take care out there and be safe. Thank you very much. Now for us in the room, we're going to have